My name is Professor Robert Darden, and I am the very lucky husband of Dr. Mary Landon Darden. This is the official book launch on Facebook Live of her new book, Entrepreneuring: The Future of Higher Education. It has been an exciting journey to get to this point, and before we get deeply into it, I want to do a very quick thank you to the people that helped make this happen. In addition to the team of thousands at Facebook Live, including Mark Zuckerberg, who I'm sure is tuning in right now. Julie, who is our on-site director.
Julie Salas.
Wynn Darden, who is in the Great East Coast, and Van Darden, who is also on the Great East Coast, coming to us to make sure that we get every nugget of wisdom from Dr. Darden on the surface of her book.
Absolutely, and I would also like to thank my board, Charlie Boyd and Chris Bramer, my partner, Jay Box, for all that they do. You all are wonderful. You're amazing. There's so many people that we could thank, but I know you all want to get into the questions, so I think we ready to begin?
Questions? I've got questions. And in fact, you've got questions too, I suspect. So if you will send us your question on Facebook Live, and if you will send a comment, it doesn't matter, but if you'll include your email address, we will put you in the drawing for a signed copy of Dr. Mary's book. So remember, put your email address on it. We'll put you in the digital pot, pluck one out at the end of the show here, and make sure some lucky viewer gets a copy of her book. So, with that said,
well, do you want to, I hope everybody has their happy hour beverage. Do you think we should do here we go.
We do. I have my root beer fizzy that I've been saving for more than 20 years, and it seems to have worked pretty well. 2, Entrepreneuring: The Future of Higher Education, and long may you wave, Dr. Mary.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you, and happy hour to you all.
Thank you.
You know, I think fizzies go stale after about a decade.
I think they do.
Stuff.
Yeah.
All right, our first question, and I see that some questions are already arriving here. Okay, colleges and universities have been around a really long time. What made you decide now that all of a sudden they needed to be saving?
Well, I think that they've always needed some help. Many hundreds of years ago, not so much. You know, they were probably doing what they needed to be doing by preparing people for medicine, for preachers for the pulpit, and attorneys and government officials. But we started to evolve, and it was a very slow process. And then we were hit with the 80s and 90s and the birth of all of this technology and so much rapid change. And it wasn't just within the academy, but it's within business and industry and within society. Jobs are changing. So many of the jobs that we've had in the past are now automated, totally automated. So we don't necessarily have positions for those anymore. We have more sophisticated, highly trained positions, and we have to get people ready for those. Now, the academy hasn't been the best in the world at doing that, at preparing people for those jobs. In some cases they do. The community colleges actually focus on that a little better than many of the universities. And I'm not saying that we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, you know, we don't need critical thinking. We don't need a core foundational knowledge. We do need that, but we also need more. We need to be able to connect to jobs and train people for those jobs so that they're ready. And when they get out, they can get a job and they can actually pay their student loan back, because most students go to college on federal assisted loans. And to give them a way to pay those back. So it's a really critical issue right now. Colleges and universities need more help than they ever have. More of them are closing now than ever in the past. That rate is escalating. They've got to get some help, and we're here to help them.
Well, if colleges have been around this long, and they have, what are some of the barriers? What are some of the weaknesses in the higher education system that keeps them from actually making this leap into the year 2021 and beyond that they haven't thought they've had to do in the past?
Well, that's a really good question. Part of what made the academy strong and stable was its resistance to change. but that's become a liability in today's game. Now, we don't want to change so radically that, again, that we throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we do need to make those changes. And it's really something that has, as I said, escalated and gotten to kind of come to a head and caused so many institutions to close. So we've got to intervene. And the change factor and the resistance to change is just embedded in the academy. Faculty are very often resistant to change, and some of that's good, some of it not so much. So we can be so resistant that we just don't even guarantee our own future, or we even commit suicide with our own future. So we've got to get everybody on board, leaning in and buying into entrepreneurial change and innovation.
Well, that brings us to our very first question from Facebook Live. I'm Robert Darden. I'm here with Dr. Mary Darden, who is the author of the new book, Entrepreneuring the Future of Higher Education. We have a question from Catherine Welberg, who says exactly what you're saying. How might you engage faculty at PWIs to better move forward into this form of radical transformation, when faculty, after all, have been for so long the keepers of the past?
Wow, Catherine, that is a fabulous question. And I'll tell you what, it's easier coming from the outside. I've gone to many institutions and given talks, and I've given them to faculty. And honestly, the best approach that I have had that I think works the best is I go in and say, look, you know, you've got a job right now. If your institution closes because it couldn't keep up, because it couldn't change, then you won't have a job anymore. And trust me, that's happening to far too many institutions. So it just is a matter of, do you want to have a job and do you want to make a difference, or would you just rather pack it in? So that's the hard, honest truth. And faculty and administrators and boards need to hear this. Students need to hear this. It's a reality. And unfortunately, I often have to deliver this rough and rugged, bitter pill to these groups of people, but it's the truth.
I remember reading a year or two ago Dr. Clayton Christensen, who, like you, is kind of in the business of seeing the future of all of this. He said, with current trends, both at the Regent Board of Directors level, the administrative level, the faculty level, and unfortunately the donor alumni level continues, and this is before COVID, that in a very short time, we're going to see 50% of all Americans, colleges and universities shut down or merge. Now, he may have backtracked a little bit on that, but not a whole lot. We're talking about 1,000 colleges not being here in the year 2030. What do you say to that?
Absolutely right. Yes, the Christensen Institute did back down a little bit on that prediction, but they said that the spirit of that prediction is still true. We're going to see a huge amount of institutions fail. And I would venture to say that probably about 50% of all colleges and universities, and there are about 6,000 depending on how you count them, whether you count the nonprofits or the for-profits with the nonprofits, but they definitely are dancing in the dragon's jaws, and we're going to see a large number close. Now, I don't think it's going to be half. It's not going to be half in 15 years like Christensen originally said, which again, they did back off of that a little bit. But we are going to see certainly many, many hundreds and maybe even thousands of institutions that fail within the next couple of decades. So many are on the border of failing right now. They're right on the cusp, and COVID has sent them right to the edge. And so we're going to see a lot of closings, and besides the closings, we're going to see mergers. And this is something that I hope colleges that are really in danger of closing will think about, using the remaining resources to strategically merger with another institution so that they can actually place their faculty into somewhere where they can work beyond the closing of that institution, place their students in continuing programs in an institution where they actually will get a degree that is going to be recognized in the future, and it saves the integrity and some of the personality and what is being offered at that institution and puts it into another one so that that can continue in some shape or form.
One of the things that I most have enjoyed spending time with you the last 33 years is your deep and abiding love for your first college, Sweet Briar. Sweet Briar, spectacularly beautiful college in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia.
Yeah.
Nearly closed.
Yeah.
And it, by the grace of God and some extraordinary alumni, it didn't.
Right.
But you have said that Sweet Briar, the historically black colleges and universities, a lot of private universities are like the canary in the mine. Yeah. What does that mean?
Well, yeah, and it's heartbreaking. You know, women's colleges first emerged because women were not permitted to go to the big Ivy League colleges. When I went to college for the first time, Princeton did not accept women. I went to a women's college. It's the same thing with historically black colleges and universities. They formed initially because colleges weren't integrated. And now that they are, now that they're co-ed and integrated, then that has changed the structure. It's shifted a little bit. What we're finding, interestingly, though, is, especially with things like Black Lives Matter, is that a lot of people are returning to those places where they feel safe. Women's colleges and historically black colleges are kind of seeing a little tiny bit of a renaissance. And I think that's a good thing. I think they have a lot to offer. Going to a women's college really helped me to be a leader and to be strong and to have a voice and to be heard. And so I love these colleges, but they were in such a high risk situation because funding was lower for them. Their enrollment was beginning to drop. And of course, most of them are highly tuition dependent. So your tuition is your lifeblood. And as that started to happen, then some of them were at risk. But Sweet Briar actually rallied their alumni. Their alumni rallied themselves. And they were, fortunately, they had a wealthy alumni. And so they raised enough money to keep the college open. And they're still open today. And they're doing great, innovative things. It's a fabulous, fabulous college.
Well, that relates to our next question from one of the brightest people I know, Steve Orr, says, could you give us a few specific examples of the kinds of changes colleges and universities, not just the HBCUs and private small colleges and women's colleges, but colleges and universities in general need to make sure they're not that canary?
Absolutely, Steve. Thanks for that question. It's a great question. There are a number of things that, of course, we know the number one reason why colleges and universities close is because of funding. They don't have enough money. So they have to increase the revenue streams. And I talk about it as like legs on a stool, where, you know, traditionally they have had donors and they've had tuition. Tuition is disappearing, and it's going to continue to shrink and disappear. And I would even say possibly go away at some point. So that's not enough to float that boat. So we talk about having something like 10 or 12 legs on that stool. And one example would be partnering with business and industry. I encourage presidents to get out and meet the leaders in the companies in their region and talk to them and ask them questions about, what do you need? What can we do for you and your employees to prepare them for the future? And we actually did this when I was a campus dean in San Antonio. We worked and partnered with various business and industries and provided on-site degree plans for their employees. And we tried to customize it as best we can, but that's not one of the strengths of higher ed as a rule, but it's becoming more so as we're getting more user-friendly and more geared towards customization and specialized delivery. So that's one example. There are many others. Intellectual property, grants. There are so many. Continuing education is huge, especially as we have this huge, humongous aging population. Who was it? Dick Wald, I think, said the pig through the python. We have lots of baby boomers that are in their retirement years and they want to do things. So that is not only an opportunity to educate, but it's an opportunity to raise funds for the institution. So there are so many things we can do, and that's part of what we do at HEI is we help people to do that.
Now, as a baby boomer, I've been called many things, but a pig and a python is very low on that list of my favorite analogies. The person making that outrageous statement is Dr. Mary Landon Darden.
It's not the first outrageous statement I made.
Who we're having a Facebook Live on for Entrepreneuring, the Future of Higher Education, who her new book just came out. I'm Robert Darden, her husband and general lackey, clearly, on this. We welcome your questions and comments. I see we got a lot of folks on here lined up to do it. Remember, if you'll put your email address on your question or comment, we'll make sure you go in the drawing for a signed copy of Dr. Mary's beautifully inscribed book right here. A related question to Steve's, and one actually that follows Catherine's as well, is that in your book you talk a lot about the importance of organizational and cultural change.
Yes.
Cultural change in colleges and universities to survive. What kind of cultural change? Aren't they doing everything right? They're educating young people. What kind of change can there be?
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of it. When we first did our first president's workshop, executive workshop, which is a 9-part series where we teach presidents about entrepreneuring the future, we asked them what was their biggest concern about higher education, and all of them said, they wrote it down so nobody saw anybody else's answers, all of them said that dropping enrollment was their #1 concern. By the time we finished the whole 9-session workshop, I asked them the same question, and all of them said cultural change and organizational change, that those were the things that they were most concerned about. You cannot pivot in radical transformational ways without changing the culture within the institution to be able to do that. There's often a lot of resistance within the institution. There's one thing that I point out, and I talk about this quite a lot, is there is discrimination within the academy. I mean, women, and I did my dissertation on studying 18 women college presidents and the changeable attributes that contribute to their success. That's a long one. Take a breath. And and the reason for that is only 20% of college presidents were women. And I thought, how are they getting there? And of course, if you look at somebody who also is a person of color, then that is another strike against them for getting to the top. It shouldn't be. In the academy of all places, it shouldn't be. We should be the one place that practices equity and is really good about being fair and giving the best candidates the best shots. And we have failed. We have got to increase and enhance our diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we've got to do that by making it part of our mission, by making it part of our overall operation, not just having somebody in charge of diversity, not just having a Martin Luther King Day, but in actually changing the culture within the institution to be absolutely inclusive. And we have to do it. Society is never going to get there if the academy doesn't pave the way. So everybody lean in and let's get that done.
For a long time, colleges and universities aimed at the same target demographic. 18-year-old boys and girls from a well-off enough family that they could go to school.
Right.
And for a long time, people from fairly modest means could do that.
Right.
Not so much the case anymore, A.
Right.
And B, as you're saying, this new demographic, the new wave of people wanting to go to school may be a single mom with 2 kids who's tired of doing minimum wage jobs and wants to have that little shot to move out. And they want to go to a college, and they want to go, and one of the great barriers continues to be the continually escalating cost of higher education. And I'm not just talking private schools like my own, like Baylor. It is expensive to go to the University of Texas. It's
Right.
expensive to go to college. This is an incredible barrier when you have a workforce that's dying for what the schools have to offer, even in their kind of impaired state,
Right.
and it's not happening. What can we do about that?
Well, first of all, yeah, it is a fact that the traditional age students, 18 to 22 or 18 to 24, however you want to measure that, it is shrinking, and it's going to continue to shrink. There's no question about it. But here's the shocker, and this is the one that really floors people when I tell them. Of all the prospective students for higher education, only 15% of them are traditional age students, 18 to 22. 15%. So we're fighting so viciously over this small and shrinking population when we should be looking at the 85% of the people out there,
Sorry about that.
that actually are needing an education. They're non-traditional students. They're usually well older than the 24 age. Our average age in our non-traditional campus in San Antonio was 38. So we need to look beyond the traditional student and look at our society. STAMATS did a study, and it showed that 52% of all Americans either want to get a degree or want to earn another degree. 52%. If you do the math, that breaks down to 26,000 prospective students per institution in the U.S. Now, we all know that nobody needs 26,000 freshmen coming into and very few people have that many. But the bottom line is there is a huge market out there. We're going after the wrong market. We need to be going after the people that need to retool and relearn and get specialized training, get advanced degrees, graduate degrees, and we need to connect with them. We need to connect the dots. Higher ed has not done a great job at that, and we need to do better.
All right. Speaking of connect the dots, Greg Lehman, who knows a thing or two about education himself, has a tough question for you.
Oh. Hi, Greg.
You're not going to like it.
Oh, dear. You would ask me a hard one. Okay.
Greg. Outside of schools like Howard or Spelman, some of those that have been well endowed, particularly on the East Coast, many of the HBCUs are struggling.
Yes.
Greg asked, do you think HBCUs and some, quote, white schools, although places like North Texas have a higher percentage of minorities than many other schools in the state, could merge to increase both sustainability and equity?
Merge with other HBCUs?
The white schools and the HBCUs.
Oh, okay. Okay. I think that schools are going to have to do what they need to do to survive financially. But I do not want to see, the United States is #1 in higher education globally. And I think one of the reasons for that is our depth and breadth and diversity and specializations, and the fact that 60% of all people actually have access to higher education in the US. Only Canada and Australia have those numbers. Even in the UK, it's only 30%. So what we need to do is make sure, first of all, that everybody has access. And then we need to figure out the financial models, how to fund these things. I want to see our HBCUs stay open. I want to see our women's college stay open. This is part of the depth of our character and the strengths that we have in this country. So I would like to see those colleges continue to be uniquely who they are. I think one thing that we need to do that's critically important is that we must stop trying to be all things to all people as institutions. We are no longer a regionally based entity where we're serving the people within our region and our state, and we serve them in everything that they might need in higher ed. We are a global community, and that has tipped the table over. We need to see where our strengths are. We need to capitalize on those, build those, be uniquely who we are. Yes, we need to do liberal arts education and critical thinking and all those things. We need to teach people how to communicate, how to have a good basic education. But beyond that, we need to take them the step further. And that's by educating them for the specialized field that they're going into, which we're going to see more and more and more of. And it's going to take more education and more training to get there. We know higher education is valuable. We know that salary income it correlates directly. People that have professional degrees have the highest level of income. So we just need to reinvent ourselves and reimagine ourselves according to our strengths and cutting our losses. You know, if we're not very good at something, why are we trying to do it? You know, somebody else is going to be able to do it better. And so we need to kind of trim down and try to find a balance so that we are really the best at these things, and people are going to come to us for that. And that also frees up a lot of revenue for operation by doing that.
So you're telling me that if the University of Texas has one of the best Sanskrit programs in America, 20 other schools in Texas shouldn't have Sanskrit programs?
Go figure. Yeah. You know, yeah.
Radical. Which brings to a question from a well-known AAUP, American Association of University Professor Firebrand, sends in a question trying to catch you here.
Could that be Dr. Lynn Tatum?
I don't know. All I can see is the question.
Okay.
Which, other than the massively endowed Ivy Leagues and the near-light Ivy Leagues, such as, I don't know, Duke, and maybe the really big public Ivy Leagues, particularly Midwest and such, and UT, which schools are in the most danger right now?
Good question. The schools that are in the most, you know, the one thing that you can look for to see if a school is in a lot of trouble is, if you can find this, and in your private schools it may be a little more difficult, is if a school is 85% tuition dependent or more, so 85 to 100% tuition dependent or more, they are living on the cusp and they're in danger of failing. Another sign that can just give you a hint that whether somebody, just a surface hint, is how much deferred maintenance there is on a campus. So if you go to a campus and you see a lot of repairs, paint that needs to be, you know, yards that are not kept, and then that's going to give you an inkling a lot of times that you need to check into this deeper, or you need to write a check to your institution for a lot of money so that they can take care of their deferred maintenance. But those are, you know, mainly it's the tuition dependency that is the greatest risk, because tuition is, I mean, it depends on how many people enrolled. And if your enrollment drops, boom, your revenue is gone with it. So other sources of revenue, again, other revenue streams.
Which brings me to the question of all, you said there, you know, needs to be 10, 12 stools to this.
Legs to the stool, yeah.
Stools that help buoy up a college beyond tuition and endowment.
Right.
How did you come to choose the entrepreneuring model? And by the way, that is the title of her new book, Entrepreneuring, the Future of Higher Education. This is Dr. Mary Landon Darden. I'm Robert Darden. And we're here on the launch of her new book by that very same title. So of all of the options, you chose entrepreneuring. Why is that?
Well, because when you get the kind of disruption that we're experiencing, and you need the kind of radical transformation, and it is radical, tweaks and cuts will not get you there, then you really have to reinvent yourself in a lot of ways. You have to reimagine. So we do innovation training. As a matter of fact, Dr. Greg Lehman, who is our innovation engineer expert, he does our training for our presidents on how to do actual live innovation and to do new projects that can radically transform the institution. We can't just do a strategic plan that does a little here and a little there. Many of these colleges and institutions are going to have to do reinvention in many ways. So it's going to take the effort and the time, but it is going to have to be radical for most.
One of the interesting things about this whole COVID pandemic is how very quickly most faculty made that transition from in-class, in-person, to using particularly Zoom. Mm-hmm. And it's something that's been talked about for years, that the future of the university is to have a worldwide audience base, and so that a Baylor could have classes in Africa, have classes in Asia. But Zoom brings its own problems, as does all online education. One of the things that Dr. Steve Gardner, who's a well-known economist and who's written on a number of topics related to this, is he has been worried because he has been involved with Baylor's move to online for some time. Where are the standards? Where are the qualities? How are we going to do some kind of assessment when you have a significant portion of your audience, including paid audience, all online. Should those be set by accrediting agencies, he asked, or who?
Well, that's a very complicated and a very good question. Obviously, higher ed's been put in a blender as far as, with moving to this all of a sudden online everything. This is a really shocking new thing for us. And most of us have done online, but to just flip and do everything online all of a sudden has been traumatic. There are a number of programs, companies, there are so many things happening. It's a very complex structure to watch. And I know of a lot of companies that are working on these very issues. And some of them are doing some really great stuff. I'm expecting that we're going to see even more disruption. I think we're going to see, and I know we're going to see Silicon Valley stepping in to higher education. They already are stepping in. And we're going to see some of the people that are used to doing innovation and used to doing entrepreneuring or entrepreneurship, as they call it. They are going to be setting up new models and new standards. I think that accreditation is something that we're going to have to ramp up and change and transform so that it fits what we're trying to do. And that's not going to be no small matter either, because we kind of have our little set in ways accreditation bodies that have been pretty consistent for a long time. So we've got a lot, there's change in the academy, but there's change all around it as well. And I think that we will see, and we are seeing, people going to school in programs, or even course share programs where you can, with a company, a university, let's say 20 universities can put a shared course up there where anyone from any of those universities can take those courses. And there are a lot of those companies out there. So I think the disruption's happening. It's going to continue to happen. And I think the really good stuff is going to rise to the top. And there's going to be a lot of fallout from it, of things that just weren't all that good. But we're going to have to sort through it. And it's not going to be painless.
There's a famous quote attributed to everybody from Henry Kissinger to Winston Churchill. The reason why faculty fight so fiercely is that the stakes are so low. And that brings me to mind an old country song about a song artist who is a little bit country but a little bit rock and roll. One of the things that faculty hate is when you start talking about things like product and outcomes and making some kind of business model. And yet in this book, Entrepreneuring, the Future of Higher Education, by my guest, Dr. Mary Landon Darden, is that maybe faculty and administration and alumni need to be thinking a little bit less ivory tower and a whole lot more Silicon Valley. What do you have to say to that to defend yourself?
Amen. I say amen to that. Yes, first of all, we need to reimagine who we are in the academy. Everybody in the academy needs to be a player for the transformation and success of the future of their institution. And that means that faculty need to be recruiting students. They need to be helping to get people into the institution. They need to be developing new projects. It means everybody does. I mean, staff, everybody needs to be on board with this. And, we can't live with the model the way it was before, with everybody siloed and everybody having their little job. That will not work anymore. We have got to change that. We've got to work together. We've got to lean in to do the hard work that is going to be all of our responsibility now. And we all must rise up as leaders and help lead that change.
Well, to be leaders, we need to know who those leaders are.
Yeah.
Dr. Cassie Burleson, who has worked to place Baylor students in great jobs for 30 years here at Baylor at least, has a question related to that. She says,
hi, Dr. Burleson.
She wants to know that where are some of the schools that are doing a good job that are helping switch the traditional academy to workforce needs of students and helping this upskilling that's going on?
Well, there's lots of them, and there are lots of people doing great transformation. It's not the same at all institutions. I will hold up the community college. Now, it's not everybody, but it's a lot of community colleges that are actually doing really well at workforce training and specifically finding out what people need and building those training programs. And they're not necessarily degree programs. Not everyone needs a degree. They can get a certificate or just, do a 1 or a 2 year or even a 6-week program. We have people doing things like coding academies. That's one of the entrepreneuring projects that came out of one of our workshops. Was one president went back and met with one of the generals in charge of Fort Knox and asked him what they needed. And they said, we need people who know how to code. And so they started a coding academy, and I think it takes 3 months of really intensive study. They do something like 12 hours a day, and then they finish and they graduate and they complete. And so that's worked really well. You have models like the University of Southern New Hampshire, which has lowered their tuition. Even Briar cut their tuition in half. And they're changing their model so that they're more user-friendly, they're more flexible. If we are going after the non-traditional student, we have to understand who they are and what they are. They are people that are not only older, but many of them have a family, they have children, they have full-time jobs. And so, a lot of those jobs are 9 to 5 or 8 to 5. And so we need to be teaching things at night. We need to be teaching things. And what about the military? What about trying to take courses and being deployed? We need to structure those classes so maybe they can finish 1 or 2 classes in 5 to 8 weeks. And then if they get deployed, they don't lose their whole semester. So we've got to structure it in a way that's going to fit our students' lifestyle. We can no longer look at it a way, and I know a lot of faculty are going to be mad at me about this, and I'm sorry, but it's a reality. We cannot schedule our classes around what's good for the faculty. We have to schedule it around what's good for the students. Period. We really do.
As my old Baptist preacher in East Texas said, as a faculty member, you've quit preaching and gone to meddling.
Yep.
One of the fascinating things about your book, and by the way, if you send a question or a comment, be sure and include your email address, and you'll be entered into a digital drawing for a signed copy of Dr. Mary's book here. One of the fascinating bits of your research through the years, both your books, is about the example of Arundel Community College.
Yeah.
This place is floating the boat for a whole bunch of schools out that way because they were early adopters of the things you're saying. Tell us about Arundel.
Okay, Arundel Community College System in Maryland was one that I studied with this first book, Beyond 2020. They're a community college system that got it real early. That workforce was really the forefront, and it was the frontier for tomorrow. And so they started radically developing that. And eventually, their enrollments in workforce outnumbered credit, regular traditional enrollment. And so they built and built. And I went in and asked one of the vice president. I said, so how many vice presidents do you have? And he said, well, we actually have 3 full-time vice presidents in workforce development. He said, and I said, well, how many directors do you have? Because our school had a handful, 2 or 3 directors of continuing ed, maybe 4 or 5. And he said, we have 50 full-time directors in continuing ed. And I mean, that just blew me away. And the thing that was so surprising was I realized they're doing the right thing, and this is going to be the future. This is where we have to go. So a lot of schools, there are a lot of universities that hardly do any workforce development, and especially the smaller ones, and they're going to have to go there. They have to go there. It is the future. It is the frontier.
Follow-up question from Dr. Burleson related to this. And as schools have been having their money cut from the states, and as private schools have had to fight through the pandemic with everybody else, in many cases lower giving and such, that has meant that even down to the departmental level, that fundraising, that
Yes.
my own school, the journalism, public relations and new media department, is now responsible for a lot of its own fundraising for the things we need.
Great.
Burleson asks, what role might university or college-based enterprises play in raising capital? What actually can we do? If we can't do the same things that TSTC does,
Right.
What can we do at Bay?
Oh my goodness, yes. That's so important. And we're all, like I said, we're all going to have to lean in and be part of everything. Fundraising is going to be part of, the responsibility of everyone. The tricky part of this is that you have to communicate well and you have to work with your development department, because if you were to go out and, let's say, ask a major corporation in your area to fund your fall festival for $1,000 or something, you may have somebody in development that's getting ready to make a $100 million ask of that corporation. So you have to try to coordinate and communicate with development. But yes, raising funds, I mean, just being a steward, writing a check to your college, writing a check to where you went to college, writing one to where you work, and then doing some fundraising. Relationships is something we talk about all the time. Building relationships. Those are building bridges in so many ways. So involving your alumni, getting people involved and active and caring and being a part of your institution is so important. People that have money want their money to count for something. They want it to do something important that they believe in. So what we have to do is do a better job of finding out what that donor wants to do with their money and build them a bridge or a pathway to be able to do that. Once we do that, the money will come in. But in the meantime, the most important thing is you don't go out and meet somebody and then ask them for money. You've got to cultivate that relationship. And that's at all levels. That's in the community, with business and industry, with your alumni, with all your constituents. You have to constantly work at those relationships. And if you do it all really well, and it's a lot to do, and fundraising is, by the way, one of those legs on the stool, still is, then you may survive.
One of the things that I like about your book, and yes, I've read it, in fact, edited it to there,
And thank
along
you.
the way, my pleasure, is that you're not demonizing anybody, you're not making this as an either or.
Right.
And Dr. Ann McGlashan, who's in the Modern Foreign Languages, which is one of those
Hi,
that
Dr.
sure
McGlashan.
has probably felt some squeeze on all this. You're not saying that it's not possible to have a robust liberal arts education, which obviously helps students with their critical thinking, which will help them throughout their life, alongside this entrepreneurial mindset. You're saying they're a dual train here.
Right. I mean, everybody needs a foundation and an education, and the more education you get, the richer you are and the more capable you are mentally. But what we don't want to do is provide an education exclusively in an area that may tie back to some of the older trivium and quadrivium models that don't directly relate to a job. It's wonderful to take classics or some of these courses to help enrich your brain and your mind and your knowledge base, but it's not going to get you a job. And so we need to be careful about what we have people major in. If people are going to major in something and they don't intend to go on to graduate school to do something that's career oriented, then we need to figure out, okay, do you need a double major, or do you need to minor in something that you really are enjoying and gives you a lot of rich knowledge, but major in something that's actually going to be a way you make a living when you get out? So we've got to be very careful about that. Too many people have finished college with a degree that doesn't connect anywhere. And I know, because I used to get hundreds of applications from people wanting to work for our college, and they had a bachelor's degree in something that didn't relate to anything that we were doing. So that's what we have to be mindful of. It's not that there's not value there. There's lots of value. But we have to make sure that we're connecting the dots with the student, their gifts and talents, to their educational path that will ultimately culminate in them getting a job that will help them make a living and pay off their student debt.
Now, you've probably alienated many of your friends who will never speak to us again, as you have tried to put a spark under what is higher education to ensure, because you do love it for the future. For all those people who are feeling miffed at you, we have a question or a comment from a young viewer named Elin, who says he is watching you and says to tell you that he loves you guys very much.
Oh, Elin, I love you, darling. Asa, these are my grandchildren, and oh my gosh, what a treat. I love you.
And part of what you've been doing all along is to make sure that when Elin and Asa get to the point of going in college, they have this rich cafeteria of options that you and I had. Now, actually you had, because I was only accepted in 2 schools, but you could have gone a lot of other places. Thank God Baylor was trying to make money and let me in that year. But the deal is, part of what this whole book is about is not to scold anybody, but it's to be a cautionary tale. If we don't do some things now, some of this extraordinary diversity that American higher education has offered, that is nearly unparalleled in the history of this planet, could be lost. We need all of these schools, and we need the schools to lean in, and we need the alumni to lean in, and the boards to lean in. So we are running out of time, believe it or not. You have given us an extraordinary amount of information, and I'm always in awe of your knowledge on all of these things. I do want to take a moment and thank our assistants who have come in from a technical side, Julie, Van, and Wynn, who have made this all possible, and Mark Zuckerberg, if you're watching, do the right thing. All of that. Thank you so much. We want to make sure
we're going to do a drawing.
We do have to do the drawing. And the drawing is of all the people who sent in either a question or a comment. Julie blindfolded herself, went outside, called an accounting firm, and they came in and used a digital hook to somehow magically reach across the universe to pluck out a name, and she has just handed me the name. And the name is Catherine Wellberg.
Yay, Catherine!
Thank you for your participation and question, by the way. Thank you,
Yes.
Julie, for going through all those technical hoops to make sure this was a fair and unbiased approach. Dr. Mary's book is available for Amazon and through the Rowman and Littlefield site. We will want you to continue this conversation. Dr. Mary's here. You can reach her through Facebook. You can reach her by Googling her name. It'll come up. She is one of the few futurists on higher education working out there. Thank you for spending this time with us.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Darden, do you have any closing words?
The only thing I have to say is, indeed, what motivates me more than anything is knowing that we have to seek relevancy for future generations in our education system. And it is very much my grandchildren, my children and my grandchildren that drive me towards this. I want them to have the rich opportunities of the future that they need. And I want all people to have those opportunities. It's not fair for just the rich to be able to go to college. We need to find a way so that all people have these opportunities and they have the relevant opportunities that they need. And that's the goal. And our goal is to help presidents and leaders make the critical pivots that they need to make to get there. So thank you all so much for your time tonight. And you've been wonderful. And we would love for you to contact us. So please do.
So as we end our happy hour, I lift a toast of my root beer fizzy to you all for joining us, to Dr. Mary for writing a book that will help change the world, and have a blessed evening.
Thank you all.